The Theater History Podcast is supported by HowlRound, a Knowledge Commons by and for the theater community. It's available on iTunes and howlround.com.
Hi, and welcome to the Theater History Podcast. I'm Mike Leader. For most of us, our knowledge of modern acting techniques begins with a big name like Constantin Stanislavski. The standards that he and his successors established have guided actor training for generations, and most of us uncritically accept them. But, as today's guest points out, there's a lot in traditional acting theory and practice that doesn't always fit well with the increasing value that we place on diversity in theater and performance. Dr. Sharrell Luckett is a scholar, actor, director, and the creator of the solo show Young, Gifted, and Fat. She's an assistant professor of theater and performance studies at Muhlenberg College and the lead editor of Black Acting Methods, Critical Approaches. Sharrell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give us a sense of how, historically speaking, Black actors and other actors of color have engaged with and maybe been ill-served by traditional actor training and acting methods?
Yes, I can. In reference to training, I would not go so far as to say that Black actors and actors of color do not learn anything from other methods. That's just not true. What is missing is equal representation and equitability of progenitors of acting methodology and training programs. So what happens is Black actors don't see themselves in the people who are creating the work. So they're always the receivers versus being able to see themselves as somebody who sat down and codified or created a method. So there's no cultural relationship, and what you're losing is the same thing that you're losing in other education sectors, I guess. You know, the same way how when you look at the presidents of the United States, what it says to Black people and what it says to women. You know, before President Obama, there were just white men, right? So it lets you know that I can't do this. And the fact that Black actors have, especially in the United States of America, from when West Africans were enslaved and brought to the Americas, they have always been performers and entertainers. They were made to perform on the slave ships. It was called Dancing the Slaves. Out of minstrelsy came musical theater. So how is it that a people, specifically Black American, how is it that a people have always been involved in entertainment and none of them have methods and methodologies? And the truth is that we do have methods and methodologies just because of, prejudice, racism, imperialism, white supremacy. They haven't been captured in different ways. Black folks were not allowed to read and write, and we could go on and on and on. And in addition to that, if we know that theater began in Africa, and we know that you have religion and ritual, that's kind of where theater sprang from, and the Africans hung out with the Greeks, and the Greeks and the Romans hung out with the Africans, then though we look to Greek theater, we need to go further back to Africa to find out the original roots of performance that we're all a part of. That's all races, cultures, and heritages. If you can frame it that way, if we all came from Africa, then we all have this ownership of methodologies. So it's more so of Black folks and actors of color need to see themselves in the work that they're doing. And before Black Acting Methods, Critical Approaches, that just was not true on this level.
Now, I'm curious about the book Black Acting Methods. One, I guess, maybe for listeners who might be curious, just a matter of terminology. You're using Black here as opposed to African American. And I'm also curious about who the book is for.
Yes. Okay. So terminology in the Black/African American community, Black folks have claimed their identity in different ways, in the U.S. So a lot of Black people use Black and African American interchangeably. African American, my understanding of it used to mean that you were a Black person who sprang from the plantations during the enslavement of Black people. But now African American, it's diasporic. It could be somebody who was born in Jamaica and they immigrated to America. So the terminology is expansive. And in the book, we use Black and African American interchangeably. And that's kind of how we explain it. Black tends to talk about anybody who identifies as Black, no matter where they are in the world. And of course, African American usually situates you in the Americas, specifically, I would say, in a U.S. framework, which the book is also written in a U.S. framework in the context of what's happening in acting studios from Black folks who do most of their work in the United States of America. The book is for everybody who's interested. The book is for whomever is interested in acting methodologies and techniques and rituals that are rooted in a Black American aesthetic. So it's for all races, cultures, and heritages. If you think about when you go into a training ground that does Strasberg or the Stella Adler studio, or you do Chekhov, or you do Meisner, anybody can kind of go in and participate, if that makes sense. So with Black acting methods, you don't have to be Black to do it. You just have to be somebody who's interested in the methodology and the framework and the rooting of it. And it's a tool that you put in your toolbox. So you can, just like at a buffet, you can experience a lot of different things. The Black acting methods don't contend with other methods. They are definitely in conversation with other methods. And the book positions Black acting methods to be in that conversation and to be central or co-central to the conversation. Since performance began in Africa. So we are filling that void. And just a quick example, in the Black Acting Method studio, the Black Acting Method studio is at Muhlenberg College, but the programming is also outside of Muhlenberg College. So I go to other colleges and universities and community centers, and I teach Black acting methods, and I also do the studio at Muhlenberg College. The scope of the identities in the inaugural cohort, because this is new, they are Black American, whose ancestors descended from the plantations. They are Black American from Jamaica, from the Dominican Republic. They are Latina, Asian American, Indian American, and also I'm missing one. White identified Jewish, and just simply white. So you have this amazing array of what we're always trying to do is be diverse, and be diverse on purpose, and bring everybody's culture into the room. And so that's what Black acting methods, the folks who are in the book, that's what they want you to do. They don't want you to erase your culture. They want you to bring your culture into the space. So Black acting methods has created that space.
Now, you made a few references to the African roots of performance. I really found that part of the introduction interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about those roots and how they relate to some of the alternative methods that you're talking about today?
Sure. Primarily the ritualistic aspect, the rituals and festivals, honoring various gods, polytheistic. So what you have in a lot of acting methodologies rooted in the Black American aesthetic is you have spirituality. There's some type of spirituality happening in the method. Like, for instance, we're going to talk about the Hendricks Method, I think, but in the Hendricks Method, you always start in a prayer in a circle, and you end in a prayer in a circle. And we do have diverse religions. So you just kind of figure it out, though, and you just honor the fact that we're going to come together and pray. And some things that, the word appropriation is a sensitive topic, but some things that are actually African that are already in other methodologies, like the community aspect. It takes a village to raise a child. Everybody works together. There is no I, there is no one. So in America, of course, we're the I generation. We're so individual. I heard somebody the other day talking about how when they work with American actors, it's super hard to get them to be an ensemble because we're such an individualistic society. And they said that it's not like that overseas in some other areas. They understand the importance of ensemble work quicker. So being community oriented and community based and sharing is also something that you will see in the methodology. So there's a lot of ensemble work. Everybody can do everybody's part. It just depends. You don't own anything. One day you may do this part. The next day somebody else may do this part. So they're sharing. And that speaks to also what we call our chapters offerings, because we see them as gifts. That's very Afrocentric and coming of, I would, and Africa's a huge continent, but coming from an Africanist aesthetic, the fact that we consider it, we're giving somebody something. Again, we're sharing. So, the community aspect, and it also speaks to the circle. That's something that you will find in most, formations and acting classrooms. The circle is appropriated from African culture. And it's okay, we can share, but that whole idea of getting in a circle comes from ritual performance, getting in an arena. And it was the Greeks who actually broke the circle, right? And so people talk about that in some of their books, but the Greeks broke the circle and then we get the proscenium. And so then the arena style stage is weird to us. But if we really think about it, a lot of times when we're first introduced to theater as children, you have storytellers, griots, come into the classroom and they tell a story. And the kids a lot of times are sitting in a circle and they're participating. So the idea of a griot, and I believe it's called jelly, but it's DJELI. But the idea of a griot is from Africa, and the idea of everybody getting in a circle and ensemble and community work and having spirituality, that's something that you'll see in these methodologies when they're rooted in Afrocentricity or Black American culture.
Now, you're writing here as a scholar, but you've also got this lengthy record as a director and a performer. Would you be willing to share some personal experiences on either how traditional acting methods haven't always quite worked the way that they're intended, or alternately, how non-traditional methods have led to success?
Sure. I think what I should point out is that I trained as an actress in the Hendricks Method. And so that's the method that I specialize in. So my introduction, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I was reared in Atlanta, Georgia. So my introduction to acting as a training ground was actually by Freddie Hendricks, who's an African-American theater director who's still working in the country. So I did not have anything to compare the Hendricks Method to until I started going into college, and I was successful because I had trained in the Hendricks Method. But that's when I started being exposed to all of the other methodologies. So Stanislavski was second, if that makes sense. I was like, oh, Stanislavski, cool. Okay, who is this? What did he do? So I was privileged to have that kind of experience where I was like, okay, I got this. So I wouldn't necessarily say, and I appreciate you saying that I love Stanislavski. The method is cool. I actually like emotional recall, which he kind of railed against at the end of his career, but it works for me. I know it's dangerous, but it works for me. What I will say is that the Hendricks Method, Freddie Hendricks trained a good deal of actors. He had a youth ensemble company called the Freddie Hendricks Youth Ensemble of Atlanta that was started in 1990. The company is still around, but Freddie Hendricks left to do other work in 2005. So the company devised 7 full-length, and when I say full-length, I mean 2 hours and 30 minutes or more, full-length musicals without a script. So these musicals are not written down. And so that's going to be a part of my work, is to actually put the musicals on paper. But these musicals are not written down. But some of the people who trained with him, so they went to Tri-Cities High School. A lot of the students went to Tri-Cities High School because Freddie Hendricks was a high school theater director. So he took some of those same children, if you can imagine, high school students, and he asked them to join his company. So they would train in the Hendricks Method during the day, and then they would go into the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta at night and train some more until 11 p.m. at night. So some of those names, some of those folks who trained with Freddie Hendricks, I think the biggest names, one is Kenan Thompson on Saturday Night Live. Another is Candy Burris, who was actually a part of the singing group Escape, but she became re-popular after Real Housewives of Atlanta. And Escape is about to go back on tour. Another one is Justin Ellington, who's a Broadway composer. He composed for other desert cities. Another person is Juanita Woodgett, who goes by D. Woods. She was a part of Danity Kane. Another person is Jewel D. Lane, who is a dancer who danced with Ronald K. Brown, and now he's choreographing with Alvin Ailey. Another one is Amari Cheatham, who went to Juilliard, and he's about to be in Denzel Washington's new movie. He plays I believe the convict, like the inmate. So the Freddie Hendricks students also went to Juilliard, NYU, Cornell University. So what you have is, if you notice the names that I mentioned, they're actors. Oh, goodness. I did not mention, my bad. Cy Gouger, a Tony-nominated actor who originated the role of Fela on Broadway. Cy's co-star is Saquon Singbla, who played Sandra Isidore on Broadway in Fela, and she just was nominated for a Tony Award playing opposite Lupita Nyong'o in Eclipse, and she also won a Drama Desk Award. So if you notice the names that I called, they also do various things in the theater. So they became actors, musicians, dancers. And so that's something that's very Afrocentric and in an Africanist aesthetic as well, breaking down the divides between playwright, director, musician. You could just go in and it's like a Montessori style training. You just do what you want to do that day. If you want to sing and write a song, you can do that. If you want to try to dance, you can do that. If you want to try to learn to play the drums, you can do that. If you want to go and write a poem, you can do that. If you think you want to try to stage manage today, you can do that as well. So students were just exposed to all of these things, but most of them, at the end of the day, they performed in the show after they got that diverse exposure to all different areas in theater. They usually performed in the show or they were playing in the band because they were doing musical theater. That's a little bit about the Hendricks Method and Freddie Hendricks.
Yeah, I was really interested to read about the various components of the Hendricks Method, and I wonder if you could maybe talk us through what some of those major components are.
Yeah, so in the book, in chapter 1, we talk about the Hendricks Method. And when I say we, I'm talking about my co-chapter author and someone who co-edited the book with me, Dr. Tia M. Shaffer. We talked about 3 tenets of the Hendricks Method. The Hendricks Method is a methodology and it's an aesthetic. It's an aesthetic. So if I can read you what the definition is, because I don't want to mess it up. So the Hendricks Method, developed while working with Black youth, is an amalgamation of empowered authorship. So that means they write their own stuff. Musical bravado. There's always going to be music. And, we use the term musical theater because that's the best way to describe it. But there needs to be some other terminology because it's not the musical theater that we think about. It's just that when you think about Black culture a lot, it's just music is just going to be involved somehow. Spirituality, which we talked about earlier, ensemble building, activism because of the lived experiences of Black folks. So Freddie Hendricks and the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta, they tackled topics like HIV and AIDS, teen pregnancy, youth violence. So you're never going in just doing theater for theater's sake. You understand that there's something bigger and that theater is used as a tool for social justice. Effusive reverence of Black culture and devising often without a script. So the 3 tenets that we talk about in the book, they are spirituality, developing the hyper ego, which is super interesting, and devising, actually, why devising is important. So briefly, I can talk about, I'll first talk about why devising is important. Devising is important for Black actors and actors of color because we often have scripts, and historically we have scripts that were detrimentally stereotypical, negative. You're always playing the prostitute, the thug, the drug dealer, the mammy, all of these stereotypes that arose out of the enslavement of Black people. So a lot of scripts, are written by white folks and they have this white imagination. They've never interacted with Black people and they have this white imagination of what they think Black people are. And I always, when I teach my class, I always say, if we're so segregated in the U.S. and if white people are able to be by themselves, how are they able to write these voices? Not just Black folks, but Asian folks, Indian folks, Native American. If we don't interact, how are they able to write these voices? And, the answer usually comes up from TV. And TV is so racist. We're getting better slowly, but it's so racist and it's built on stereotypes that you can still see today showing up in different types of ways. So, and I ask those simple questions like that. It's like, where are you getting your knowledge? Why don't you realize that, that humans are 360-degree characters? So every culture has killers. Every culture have also, they have saints, right? So you want a 360-degree gamut of culture. But because of that, it's important for Black folks and folks of color to write their own material because we can at least control our narrative. So while there are many critiques about Shonda Rhimes and Scandal, at least Shonda Rhimes is controlling her narrative. So she can write what she want to write and we can critique what we want to critique about her. And we can say, Kerry Washington is a modern day Jezebel. That's valid, but it's coming out of a Black woman's imagination. And so therefore it makes it valid as well in a different way. So we have to be able to control our narratives. And the way you do that is to write your own material. So that's why that's a crux of YEA and also a couple of other methodologies in the book. They write their own material. Black actors and actors of color need to have that space to write their own material. So if you're serving them, you need to have that laboratory for them to do that. The hyperego, I'll talk about that really short. The hyperego is just understanding that the lived experience of Black people is going to be super hard, for lack of a better word, super hard. And you just have to, you don't have the privilege of getting stuff and being mediocre or having a bad day. You have to always be on. There's that phrase, that adage that as a Black person, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And unfortunately, that's often the case. So you have to be excellent all the time. And so you therefore try to develop exercises to get this extreme focus and this extreme sense of self. So you'll have a lot of people who work in the Hendricks aesthetic, in the Hendricks method. They'll say, I can change a tire. I can change a car engine, and I've never done it before. I can swim. I can ice skate. It's just this extreme sense of like, I can, what you need, because you don't need to X yourself out of any opportunity. So you have to go in with this hyper ego sense of self that I can do this. So those are some of the tenets of the Hendricks method.
What does an example like that of Freddie Hendricks and his method tell us about how we can do a better job of teaching and developing actors in a more inclusive way?
Great question. I'm going to actually talk about the appendix in Black Acting Method's critical approaches. We put an appendix in the book, and the appendix is titled Recommendations for Acting and Performance Programs that Seek to Provide Equitable Training. So I believe this is speaking to what you're asking. I won't talk about all of the recommendations, but we talk about, I'll just list a few. We talk about them with curriculum and performance opportunities. So one is that we just say that acting teachers should explore and participate in acting methods rooted within African lineage, for Africans are the first to engage in performance and we all sprang from them. Another one, number 4, reflect upon and address the alienation enacted with the term classical acting. Classical acting often includes histories and styles of white people during the Greek, Elizabethan, and Restoration eras. But where are the Black people and people of other ethnicities in all of these periods? Because we know that they were there. Imagine how alienating these courses are for non-white actors. So it's not that you can't have the course. It's that in the Elizabethan period, you need to figure out where the Black folks were and the people of color, because they were there. In the Restoration period, where were they and what were they doing on the stage? So if we're going to talk about the period, with inclusivity and finding out where were you in that lineage? Yes, because we were all over the world. So, and then number 7 is one of my favorites. Reflect on how you are selecting racial and cultural diversity in your season. Are you only choosing non-white plays and playwrights that have been vetted by white theater practitioners and foundations? So we're saying go read some plays by people of color that may not be on Broadway or off Broadway. Go find those voices where you're able to say, we're all trained, in theater history, or we've all done theater. There are plays that we like that other people don't like. Go and find those plays and don't just produce the plays that only organizations or nonprofits or big theater companies have said this is great. Do something else, or do another playwright's more obscure plays like Lydia Diamond has a lot of plays, other than Stick Fly. What's her Smart People? Find some of Lynn Nottage's more obscure plays. Is there anything else that we haven't done yet that we can do? And then for faculty and cultural awareness, one is to hire culturally Black faculty. And we said several, not just one. Hire Black faculty to direct all types of plays in your season. Yes. And then we talk about ending colorblind casting. I haven't talked about colorblind casting a lot, but there's, a lot of talk about colorblind casting and how colorblind casting is super problematic. And it's simply in the language because you're asking actors to be blind to their culture. And Justin Emeka in the book, he has a chapter called Seeing Shakespeare Through Brown Eyes, where he addresses it beautifully with classical work. He's a classical director. He does wonderful work, and he talks about what we think is happening when you colorblind cast and what's actually probably happening.
We'll post links in our show notes that will let you learn more about the book Black Acting Methods, Critical Approaches, and explore some of Sharrell's work, as well as the work of other contributors to the book. Sharrell, thank you again for a great discussion.
Thank you so much, Michael. I was happy to be in conversation today.
If you'd like to continue today's conversation, please visit howlround.com and follow HowlRound and @TheaterHistory on Twitter and Facebook. You can also visit our website at theaterhistorypodcast.net, where you can find links to all of our episodes. And you can email your questions and comments about the show to theaterhistory@theaterhistorypodcast.net. A big thank you to the staff at HowlRound who make this show possible. Our theme music is The Black Crook Gallop, which comes to us courtesy of the New York Public Library Libretto Project and Adam Roberts. Thanks as well to Tip Kress, who designed our logo. And finally, thank you for listening.